Okay, is this better? I'm trying the
Namaste to
Bluetooth.
all of you. A very warm welcome to this evening's call. This is almost the 45th call that Pragya Bharati has been doing. We've been doing relentlessly for every day, almost within 1 week of the lockdown being announced. And we've had wonderful speakers coming on our call all these days. Today is no exception. Friends, today we have Preity Upala. She is, in one word to say, Mana Ammai. She has origin in, Hyderabad, Secunderabad. Though she was born in Dubai, raised in Australia, and now lives in Los Angeles. She's a very interesting personality. She has been Miss India Universe in the past. And she has done work as actress, as producer in Bollywood, Hollywood, and she's been a model. She's been in the glamour industry for quite some time. But that's just a small part of her profile. She's been an investment banker. Then she's been a commentator, a speaker on international affairs, on strategic affairs. And she's associated with many think tanks. And she was herself interviewed by many people, and more importantly for us, she's also what she calls herself as Dharma Ambassador. She actually, you'd go and see some of her videos. She fights very, very strongly to defend the propaganda that goes against Hindu Dharma in the West. So the Islamophobia or whatever, all that, she's really done a very good job in trying to defend Bharat, in trying to defend Hindu Dharma. And so she wears many hats. Today, she's going to wear the hat of international politics. And she's going to talk to us about Indo-US relationship and how that is going to really impact the geopolitics around. Also in the light of this current Chinese Wuhan coronavirus, also the upcoming US general elections. So all these things are going to impact Bharat, and we cannot be isolated. There are issues with regard to the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. So all these issues within the given time frame, I think she will give her perspective. She's going to talk about the history of Indo-US relationship. And she will walk us through in terms of what she sees going forward is likely to happen. What should India do? And, the whole canvas of the geopolitics she's going to talk about. Probably, Preeti ji, you should start talking a little bit about yourself in terms of how did your journey go through so many, verticals, Dubai, Indian origins, Australia, and of course the glamour industry, and of course the various wonderful works that you are doing. Probably you could just give a small glimpse of it, and then you could take it from there. As always, what we do is once your talk is over, that's when we start taking question answers. Okay, where we can take, right. And then we will specifically unmute those that have asked a question. We will unmute them. We'll mute them back. That's how the protocols we run it.
All right.
Okay, floor is yours.
All right. Namaste, everyone. Namaskar, how are you? So honored to be here on this amazing channel. I think you guys are doing great works, which is so necessary at this point of time. So a little bit about myself. I truly am a citizen of the world, grew up in Dubai, lived all over the Middle East, including the Kingdom and Bahrain and, other parts of the Emirates as well. My parents had moved there before I was ever born. I, stayed there until I was about 15, when my father, who worked for an oil company, he was an executive there, he got transferred to Europe because he was working for a French company. And so we moved to Paris for a year, and then he got this amazing job offer in Australia. So we ended up immigrating to Australia as a family. And that's where I did my 12th grade. I only did one year of school, which is the 12th year. So I skipped 2 years in high school. So I was very young when I started university. I was 16. I was the youngest person in Australia, I think, that year to do my degree. And so I have a BTech, and then I have a research honors degree as well. Loved university. Was offered a scholarship to study for a PhD, which I turned down because I just didn't think that it was what I wanted to do. I had a job offer in the big city, and I knew that that's where really my destiny was placed. So started working. I was, I think, 20 when I graduated, and I was working the corporate field, worked as an investment banker and then a management consultant, a business analyst, traveled all around the world, um, bought houses, was earning six figures when I was, barely in my early 20s. But then I had a spiritual awakening at a very young age. I had some interesting incidents that sort of randomly inspired me to start meditating. And I started that, and I really was taught how to listen to my inner self, my higher self. So I started doing that, and through my deep meditations, I realized that there was more to life than what I was doing. So by this time, when I started meditating, and this is in Sydney, I was very deeply unsatisfied and unhappy with my career. I just knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I didn't know what my Dharma was, but I knew it wasn't working in some back office in Sydney, Australia. I knew that I wasn't going to change the world like that. So through my meditations, I realized I'm creative, I'm artistic, I have a lot of skills, I belong on the global stage. And all signs led to entertainment and creative industries. And so I gave up my corporate career like that, cold turkey, never to look back again. And I started studying full time in film, um, and I also worked in the film industry very briefly for a year when I was offered a scholarship to to study in New York. And I took that scholarship and I bought a one-way ticket. I moved to LA with nothing but a little suitcase and just a lot of convictions and dreams. I didn't know anyone. I had never been to America before. I had never been to LA before. And I literally landed at LAX and I could feel the Shakti. I knew I was in the right place. And I literally didn't even have accommodation, I think, when I landed, because it was such an adventure for me. And thank God I took it as an adventure, because I think it's a really terrifying thing. Anyway, fast forward several years now, and I'm very settled in LA. I do many things. I do work in the industry. I've acted in TV, film, commercials, and so on. But I'm also producing my own show. I'm very excited about that. But that's a small part. More than that, I'm very involved in spiritual projects. So I have my own spiritual radio show. I have my own show on YouTube as well called the Preity Experience. I speak around the world on politics and spirituality, which is two very contradictory topics, but I manage it, and I write for a bunch of outlets, probably for about 20 outlets around the world, some big ones, including quite international as well. Um, and I write on geopolitics, international affairs, uh, terrorism, conflicts, peace, religion, also cultures, philosophy, and things like that as well. And my first book is coming out later this year. It's actually on the divine feminine, but it's on the Shakti aspect of it. So I'm sure it'll be something that you guys would be interested in. And I will send you information. Please do connect with me, because I think you'll find a nice bridge between the East and the West in this book. And I'm a Dharmic ambassador. Of course, I always talk about Sanatan Dharma and Vedic philosophy and so on. Love traveling. My two passions in life are spirituality and travel. I've been to almost 100 countries. And it's been interesting, I think, looking at the world from that perspective. And those are my passions. I just think that it's a beautiful world out there. I do know that I'm following my dharma, and I just think that the path ahead for me is going to be incredibly exciting. So that's my intro. Now I'm going to go into a topic that I talk quite a bit about. I have spoken at various uh, great venues uh, and on this topic, because I think it's a very relevant um, and it's very timely. I think more than ever, this is a relationship that has never really received the attention that it deserves. And I think we are at the precipice of time when it ought to, and I think it's starting to gain some steam. And it won't be long before I think everyone in the world is going to be talking about it. So I'll touch on different aspects of the US-India relationship. I always look at the very beginning and then the good, the bad, sort of the pros and cons, or what has worked, the thorns in the relationship, and of course, the path forward, which is the most important aspect, I think, at the end of the day. So without further ado, I shall get on with it. So this relationship, let's go back to the very beginning. And for that, we have to go pre-independence, so pre-1947. We'll go to 1941, I believe, when the Atlantic Charter was signed between the US and the UK. Now, most Indians don't know about this, let alone Americans, that among the many reasons where India was able to get its independence from the British rule um, was this agreement, the Atlantic Charter that was signed, where FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, the President of the United States at the time, had as a requirement for all the British colonies to have self-determination. So India obviously was a crown jewel of the empire, so it also luckily was given that. And that sort of, along with other things, helped us, I guess, liberate. I mean, it's never really an independence. It was really more a transfer of power. But whatever it is, we were able to boot them off, and we were a republic. I don't even think that democracy is the right word. It's really a functioning republic. Uh, so that's the very beginning. Now, when you look at a relationship between two countries, you have to look at what you give and what you get back to get an assessment of, is this relationship worth it in your favor, or is it against, what gives, right? So let's take a deep dive into this relationship. So three factors for any strategic alliance are trade, political, and military. So let's look at these three and see where the two nations stand thus far. Trade. Um, the current trade balance is $150 billion between India and the US. And I don't know if most people know this, but it's actually in the favor of India. So we certainly, I think India is the only country in the world where the US has a huge deficit for the service industry. So that's your technology, all of it, consulting, as well as more basic services as well. So that's fantastic. So trade-wise, it's very healthy, I would say. 150 billion. This has quadrupled over the last 10 years or so. But honestly, when you look at the US and China, I think we could do a lot better. And we can't blame the other. I think we have ourselves to blame a little bit. We've been very protectionist as well, and some of it is good. But I think we have our own. There needs to be a trade, I guess, policy reformation. Let's say, including labor laws to be reformed as well. And I seriously would suggest economic reforms as well. I think this would be the time. So I came across these numbers from the official US government, and I just thought I'd read them out because I just thought they were very impressive. So the US investments in India over the last sort of decade or so have crossed the 50 billion mark. India has cleared 286 projects worth 97 billion in recent years. Indian companies have invested more than 25 billion in the US. This was several years ago, so I think now it's much more than that. 350 million of which was in research and development alone. The recent Indian aircraft defense contracts have created 40,000 jobs in the US. So these are fantastic numbers. I think there needs to be obviously a fair dialogue between the two countries to make sure that India's priorities and concerns are being met. I think a lot has been said about the climate of doing business in India, but I will say that demonizing the climate of doing business in India by US companies will be counterproductive at this point. So that's the trade bit. I would say that we can check that box. The next one is political. So politically, we are, democracies. We're actually both republics in a way. Both are secular, liberal democracies, and so there is the similarity there, synergy there. Similar kind of governance structure in some ways. Liberty and free market access. We say capitalism. I use that word a little lightly because although we say we're capitalistic and we're not communist and we're not socialist anymore, I think we still have a long way to go in that, and we still have a lot of socialist policies, I would say. So that's something that we could work on, but at least on paper, they are, they would be considered capitalist, nations. And then the third one is the military. So military, recently, the US Army has been exercising a lot with the Indian Army. The US Navy exercises more with the Indian Navy than anybody else in the world. We obviously know about the Malabar exercises, which is fantastic. I think that's important for both nations. Another area, of course, is buying of military equipment and arms. It's so ironic that for a nation which is probably the cradle of spirituality in many ways, and which gave birth to the concept of ahimsa, we actually, I think, are the most armed country in the world. We buy more arms than anybody else. It was #1 for a long time. I don't know if it's #2 now or not, but certainly it's up there, which is ironic. But given the neighborhood that we live in, the friendly neighborhood that we live in, it's a necessity, which is a shame, but that's just the way it goes. And recently they had of course, I'm sure you would have watched with great gusto, I would say, the Namaste Trump event in Ahmedabad, where that great grand event ended with a $3 billion, let's say, transaction between the two nations, where India ended up purchasing Apache and MH-60 helicopters from the US. I think you got a good product for a good price, let's say. And so India is starting to buy arms and sort of this advanced American military equipment finally from the US, because this is a very recent thing. For the longest time, and I think still we get most of our, whether it's the MiG-21s or missile system, which happens to be a very good missile system, from Russia, right? And these two obviously are two different systems. They don't always coordinate with each other, but I think the US always expected India to start buying defense equipment from it. So in that respect, I would say there is certainly a progress being made. But when I look at military, I really ask myself, look, at the end of the day, bottom line is, if we get attacked, right? If there is a serious attack, who's going to come to the rescue? I think that's a big question that you have to ask yourself. And I think history has shown in the last 70 years that we have had to fend for ourselves more often than not, with maybe one or two people coming to our defense. And the US was not really one of them. So from these three, trade, political, and military, I would say that we're good on trade. We are good on the political system. I think the military, a lot of room for improvement. I think that's maybe a missing link there. All right. So I want to quickly talk about what is working in this relationship, the good, and then we'll go we'll move to what's not working in the relationship. Okay, so good things very quickly. As I mentioned before, the political system, both are secular liberal democracies with free market access, capitalistic environment, market-driven economy. For India, that was only since 1991. But having said that, we've jumped, I think, through heaps and bounds in that way. An important sort of similarity or synergy is actually technology. So when you look at the US, the USP for the US is technological advancement. When you look at India, what can India offer to the world where the quality is very excellent? And that would be technological development and services, right? So this is like a match made in heaven. The Silicon Valley is, I think, run by Indians. Probably 50% are Indian professionals, not just low-level developers, but startups, middle management, executives. I think the top 10 tech companies today in the world, which are all located in the US, their CEOs are Indians. They're not even, some of them are not even Indian American. They're actually from India, they were born and educated in India, that even came over here, and now they've taken over these great empires because they have this inborn leadership quality and entrepreneurship and just vision. So it definitely technological synergies there. The language, I think we overlook it a lot. When people always talk about India, China, and the US as the great powers or emerging powers, with China and India, what we have, maybe where China lacks is the English language. We are definitely much more well versed in it, and we have a bigger pool. India has the largest youthful population in the world, right? I think 75% or 80% of India, the median age is 25 or 27, right? So this means that it's perfectly poised, and these people are mobile, they're tech savvy. If they all learn English, I think we'll be doing very well. So I think we actually, it's underrated that English component makes us very, very attractive in the long run. We make up where we lack in other areas. I think this is one area where we actually do make up. And then other intangible things like shared values, traditional family values, family education, and all that. That's, as the conservative Americans would have the same value structure as well. So there is a complete synergy there. That's why Indian Americans, when they move here, especially Hindus, they have no problem assimilating. They can be proud Indians, proud Hindus, as well as proud Americans. You'll find most of them extremely patriotic, very proud to be both. And you don't see that with other diasporas. Usually there's a serious identity crisis, especially with the younger folk, but with the older ones as well sometimes. But in the US, the diaspora here is very connected to their roots and also very much a part of the American fabric of society. Also shared threats. I think the two greatest threats of our time or the world are a rising imperialistic China and radical religious terrorism. These two things have plagued the world, um, and the whole world is starting to wake up and see both of these threats. I think Indians have obviously seen it for, um, well, you could say for 1,000 years, but no, we have had much more experience in this, so both of the threats, right? So that's another area where it's it's the same things that bother us, right? So those are the good things. Let's look at what's not working or what have been the thorns in this relationship, because when I talk about India-US relations, on paper, they should seem the best of friends. They should be the strongest allies, but they're not. They've never been. And even today, they're not. And you got to ask yourself, why is that? Well, some reasons are uh, foreign policy. Uh, so international diplomacy is a very delicate balancing act. I mean, it's not easy for anyone. But one of the biggest thorns in our relationship has been one of alliances. I think India has always been non-aligned, right, since its inception. And that has actually worked in a way for us. But the problem is there have been other nations there who probably preferred that we took a side and stuck to it. So we have independent relations with Iran and Russia. And we have a very good working relationship, I would say, with China. But the real problem is Iran and Russia. So I will break each one down. I think the Russian one is a very, very interesting relationship. It has a very unbreakable history with India, because when I look in the past 70 years, during the different wars that we've had, very few countries came to our rescue. And one of them was Russia, and Soviet Union, and then Russia. In the 1971 war, the US backed Pakistan. In fact, they thwarted our efforts, with that war, and ultimately, we won that war and we liberated Bangladesh. I think it was a big genocide and we lost a lot of lives, but Russia was one of the powers that did come to our rescue. In the 1962, I think America might have helped us just with some supplies, I think air supplies and things like that, but not sort of out and out. When I was doing my research, I found it fascinating to find out that the US actually recognized the independence of Pakistan before it did India, which is interesting, right? Which is very telling. So the foreign policy, I think, um, between the US and India has been extremely antagonistic in that way. So there's mistrust, I think, on both parties, on both sides, because they would say, why would you align with our adversaries, which are, Russia, for example? But from our point of view, they're not adversaries. In fact, they're, maybe in some ways the only one who actually helped us out when we needed it the most. And we don't forget those things, and nor should we. I think India-Russia relationship is something that we should continue nurturing and hold intact for a long time to come. They are not a threat to us as such, and nor are they the biggest threat out there in the world either. and most of our arms and weaponry and missile systems and jet planes and all that, fighter planes, come from Russia. And from on the other side, the big elephant in the room, of course, is Pakistan. So, I think from our point of view, this is lopsided from the very beginning of recognizing, the nation of Pakistan before they ever recognized India, to backing them during 1971 and I think a couple of other conflicts as well. I believe even including Kargil as well. I mean, we luckily sort of were more, we won those conflicts, I guess. But we don't forget who came to our rescue and who was an adversarial. Propping up military dictatorships in Pakistan. That's something that the US had no business in doing, but they did it. Pakistan has sold the US a dream. They have sold them a bridge. This is since the very inception. They sold them this grand illusory dream that they are a true ally, that they will help them in that region, and that the US could use them as a launch pad into, because this Afghanistan conflict, it's not just after 9/11. There had been issues before as well, and there had been other issues in the area. So Pakistan had always, sold this dream, which the US bought. And I think that there were times when India could have come in as well and maybe offered something to the US, but it never did. So, I guess the US just found it very appealing and went with it. And so subsequent US administrations have been, I would say, very antagonistic towards India vis-a-vis Pakistan and so on. This giving billions in aid started a long time ago, right? And I'm sure they even knew what was going on, because the entire economy of Pakistan is run by the military. It's run by the ISI, it's run by the Haqqani network, and so on, right? This is like, Christopher Hitchens always talks about it. He says this is like the Toys R Us of weapons and all sorts of bad things, right? He was all for that war in Iraq in a way, but he said that there are serious connections between Iraq, Middle East, and serious jihadi terrorism, So this is, also, despite getting these billions in aid, which never went to aid, they always went into their nuclear program, as well as training the terrorist camps, giving refuge, and so on. So, I mean, at the end of the day, after finding that Osama bin Laden, who was public enemy number one, going all the way into Rawalpindi, I guess, or close to it, and taking him out, I mean, you still continue this policy, which, how does that make us feel? Not very secure. Apparently this administration has reduced that funding, but it's never been cut. And also the nuclear deal, because both India and Pakistan were they were both developing their nuclear capabilities. They were both sanctioned, but I think the Indian sanctions were lifted maybe a little earlier. So, and anyway, then we had the nuclear deal, which worked out for us. But why does a country like Pakistan, why does it need nukes? I have no idea. It's the only Islamic state in the world that has nukes. And I really don't know why you would let that happen under your watch. And some of that, the US would have itself to blame. The famous political scientist Christine Fair once said, the US looks at Pakistan as India's problem. This is very dangerous. It's not India's problem. It's a problem for the whole world. I don't think the US quite gets that. The public doesn't get it. I think when you look at foreign office and diplomats and think tanks and all, they do. But despite that, they still plug along with it. And it's very dangerous because what they think it's India's problem, India can deal with it, but every single radical Islamic jihadi attack around the world, you can find the footprints back to, you know, the ISI and this Haqqani network and so on. So, I mean, come on, are they, I always question US foreign policy. Are they that dumb that they don't know what's going on? Or are they that sinister that they know exactly what's going on, but they still have their own plans and they have their own grand thing to roll out at the end, which I haven't seen yet. So I'd like to see, I think, definitely a new foreign policy in that region. You know, on September 11th, America found out, it learned about this Islamic terror. India has known it for a long time, and we've suffered. We've been, I think, the greatest victims in some way. And in other ways, we've also been the greatest victor as well. We've managed it, I suppose, without having a complete cultural genocide. You know, look at the recent Afghan peace deal. Completely, it's just atrocious, dangerous, really bad for the region and the world. It's like outsourcing your counterterrorism activities to the very terrorists that you are trying to wipe out. That's the way I would put it. Really, really not looking at all the options on the table. And I mean, you're really going in with a leap of faith. You're gonna, if you pull out, you're gonna leave a huge vacuum, and you know, you're gonna leave this Taliban and all the hostiles in the hands of the ISI, and God knows what they're gonna do with it. India will feel the real brunt of that. So it's reckless, but again, we have ourselves to blame because maybe we could have done more with it. You know, I think there's uh, a lot of people would say that why don't we have boots on the ground there? I mean, on the one hand, you could say it's not our war to fight, but then on the other hand, you would say that we would be the greatest victims of this problem once it unleashes. And we have a great relationship with Afghanistan. We have incredible, great goodwill there. They would welcome, I think, Indian troops, and we have a lot of troops. We have the resources, right? We even have the finances. Um, I think that's a decision that the government has made, and I think this Corona thing has actually given us some extra time because who knows, this deal might be repealed. Maybe they're going to change their mind. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? I hope that things happen and suddenly it's torn up and maybe some new options come up on the table. You know, when you look at the US, you have to offer it something that nobody else can offer it. We could have, we didn't. So Pakistan was able to fill that void. So in some ways, I think we have ourselves to blame for this. The H-1B1 visa, that is a very contentious issue. I always say the H-1B visa is the Trump card for the United States. You know, it's the H-1B visa that made America great. Again, the technological advancements and so on. So kind of putting a stop to that or reducing that actually affects the US more than it does India, especially when there is a serious skilled shortage in the tech sector for highly qualified and skilled professionals. And, you know, they just don't have the manpower within to fill that. And these professionals will go elsewhere. I think it's naive to think that, oh, if we're not going to give them a shot, or it's naive to think that you're doing these professionals a favor. You're not. They can also do very well in India themselves. There's a lot of entrepreneurs are going back to India and setting up startups, and they are getting valued at billions of dollars now, right? I think the whole game has changed. So I think people need to be honest about sort of worth and give and take here. Um, the other issue is, I maybe we'll touch on the POK thing. I'm sure it'll come up in some questions, so I'll leave that for later. The purchase of the S-400, that was a very contentious matter. We thought we would get sanctioned. When Secretary Mike Pompeo had met with Dr. Subramaniam Jayashankar many times, I think they spoke at great length about this, and he, in no uncertain terms, um, said, we respect and understand India's security needs and its uh, territorial integrity and sovereignty. And I think the S-400 sort of comes into that category, and I think they understand that it's uh, something that we need, and we need to do what we need to do to protect ourselves as a nation, and the US will do what it needs to do. So I think there is broadly a convergence there. Um, and there's the oil issue is another one as well, because we always we have a great relationship with Iran. It's a people to people kind of, it's a relationship that has, it's evolved, it's had its ups and downs, but we have used to import what, 80% of oil, much of it crude oil from Iran at a great price forever, until recently when um, we stopped or severely reduced it, and now we get some of our energy and oil needs elsewhere. So that's definitely a change, I think, and I do think that we should keep that Iranian relationship alive, because we have um, the ports, of course, the Chabahar port that is going to come in handy at some point, I hope. You must be pragmatic about it. But that's not something that you should walk away from, considering how much has been invested. Uh, in any relationship, there is there is a main power, and then there's a junior partner. This is something that Dr. Subramaniam Swamy talks about. The US is always going to be the main power in any dynamic. I'm not so sure that India is okay to be a junior partner. Uh, so, at best, you need to be equal in some ways, and you just need to have mutual respect. I think it's very important with US foreign policy and with our strategic alliance with the US, the most important thing is that we don't let the US have so much influence on us that our domestic policy changes as a result, or our things that we should be doing internally uh, are suddenly going to change. A foreign nation or a foreign power should never have that much of influence on a country like India, because it's with its population and size, you got to be very careful about influence. Uh, and also, nobody gets to dictate our alliances that we choose to have. There's no permanent friends or enemies, and we've had some relationships for a long time that are independent of the US, and we ought to, honor them and know that we can have both alliances and um, so on. I also just want to touch on China, because China is, I think, a conversation on US India relations cannot be complete without China. Um, there's so much heat, I think, that China is facing right now, and rightfully so in some way. Um, I think from an Indian perspective, it's important to realize that India's economic success in the next several decades actually depends on a healthy um, relationship, healthy economic relationship and trade with China. So that you cannot cut off from. And if you do really detract, I think your own economy will be affected and your own growth will be affected. So that's something to remember, whether you like it or not. It's, I think the whole world is dependent in some way, but I think with India specifically, our rise kind of depends also on how much we're able to export to them and maybe import what we need. I don't think that you can get all of that met with other countries. You simply don't have the capabilities until you start developing them yourselves, and hopefully we will develop some things ourselves. But it's important to have a working relationship with China. Also, I think China is the only power that can pacify, and the most extreme, it could destabilize Pakistan, because I don't think the US can. I think China is its only real fair weather friend, so to speak. And if it decided to turn its back, it would be a different story. Um, I just want to touch briefly on the path forward. Where are areas of convergence, areas for growth and possibilities? This BRI thing has been interesting, the Belt and Road Initiative. I think it's proving itself that it is not feasible, which is a good thing, because I think a few years ago, people were worried, and Americans weren't even paying attention while China was rolling this out. But we were obviously very concerned, and like sort of that BRI not going on as scheduled is a really a blessing, I think, for India and US relationship in several ways. One area, of course, where both countries should really come together is the area of intelligence and counterterrorism. I think in some ways India is an expert because of what we've faced. I think we know this problem so well. It's still new to the US, and in many ways, if they choose to listen, there's a wealth of knowledge that we could provide them. Technology, I think more investment needs to be made technology wise. I think more American companies should be investing in India, not just the professionals coming here. That's not fair, because sometimes it's extortion going on as well from the Indian side of all these great professionals, and you need to make sure that people are also being paid their worth. I think a better solution would be foreign investment in India, let's say, and it's starting to happen. I would like to see a lot more of that, because there is definitely scope for it. What else? Space, absolutely. I mean, the ISRO is, I think, the second best space program in the world, second only to NASA. The two have worked together on some small projects. I think they can come together for serious, big missions. We should be very proud of, I think, of our space capability. Given the fact that we're still technically still developing, to have such excellent scientists, that's great for us. It really puts us in I think it's only a club of 4 countries, right, that has had these missions. And I hope the next mission will be definitive. And then, of course, AI and research, there's a lot going on in that area. There's already a sharing of research between US companies and Indian companies. I mean, this big pharma is great too, because we have a multitude. I mean, India is the greatest producer of some pharmaceuticals, and we export it. Actually, that's an area where we could really do well, especially after this Corona thing. I think India's whole our stocks have gone up. Let's say people would much rather deal with us than China currently, and this is something that we have to jump on. And AI, artificial intelligence research, and so on. We have some great research labs, some great scientists. I think it's time for us to step up and kind of showcase that and partner up with the US companies. I think the Ayurvedic thing is interesting. It's the next fad, like yoga, I guess. But we have to be careful, because what we don't want is big pharma abusing and misappropriating and copying that. There's a IP situation there. I think some of the Ayurvedic, I don't know, you have to find some kind of synergy there, I guess, because it's very attractive. And I know people who work in, in labs here with big pharma, and they own labs and so on, and they tell me that it's very attractive, but we have to make sure we are regulated and cover our bases, because just like yoga, in some ways it's great that it's all around the world, but in other ways, I mean, what are we getting out of it other than just soft power and so on? I mean, it's not regulated at all. I'm all for having boards and having serious regulations and certifications and all that. I think it could there should be a legitimate governing industry, I think, to go with yoga and of course Ayurveda as well. So I think that we have to be very pragmatic. I see a lot of Indians, especially, very proud Indians. They're happy with the relationship that we see now. But you have to be pragmatic. I think you have to be honest about where is this going. At bottom line, when push comes to shove, is the US going to be there for us? What are we really getting out of this relationship? Because, if you really do the research over the past 70 years, the only reason that this relationship is intact is because I think India has been very patient and very forgiving in some ways, because it's been pretty antagonistic and kind of lopsided in a way, but we have decided to forgive all of that, and we keep elevating, I think, and going, we're always evolving, which is great. So we don't hold grudges in that way. And now we're able to enjoy this seemingly great, close relationship. Let's hope that it gets tighter and in a real way, not just optics. Because what I see in India, with India media and with our, government or the ruling party, or just people who are, patriotic and nationalistic and so on, I think they are totally sucked in by the optics, and the optics look great, but optics are just optics. I think you have to be very pragmatic and I think our expectations are too high. You need to be realistic so you don't get disappointed. I just wanted to read something before I end here, that Dr. Jayashankar, I just love all of his speeches because he's brilliant and he is concise and articulate. He once said at one of these think tank meets that once the US and India have a political and military comfort level, we can come into any situation with harmony and can collaborate on global initiatives, whether it's humanitarian operations or counterterrorism exercises. Relationships are never easy. The grand strategy underwriting our ties is fundamentally sound. It does need maintenance from time to time, and once in a while, even an upgrade. I think with India's rising economy, it will be the third largest in both PPP and GDP terms soon. And in a few years, it will be the most populous, largest country in the world. It's already the largest secular democracy. I think with the population, the size of the economy, nobody can, I don't think the US or anybody can afford to neglect it as it might have in the past. When you look at the superpowers of the future, I only see three options, because you need to have scale and scope to be a real superpower, and you can't be like a tiny Britain with 80 million or whatever population. I just don't. Yes, hundreds of years ago they did do it, but those times are gone, right? This is about growing and out sort of living everyone else, and in that way we sort of do very well. So it's inevitable. And the issue with China is, I think the world has seen with this virus what they're capable of. I think there's going to be incredible mistrust of China and the CCP and all of that good stuff, which leaves, honestly, it only leaves India and the US as these two great powers, and with the biggest uh, population and the third largest economy. Uh, One day it will be the second. Some analysts predict that it will be the largest economy, even in GDP terms, several decades from now. Uh, I think India's opportunity to prove itself as a true global leader is imperative, and it's doing that. I would like to conclude by saying that India is an indivisible ally of the US in the 21st century, and the US recognizes that. History compels and destiny beckons that these two great powers will dance with each other in the future. So with that, I would like to conclude my talks. I will open it up to Girish ji for your feedback and comments, and very looking forward to having a interesting conversation about what I just shared.
Thank you, Preeti ji. I think you've given a broad canvas. It's unfortunate that the earlier part of your talk I missed. I had this network issue, so I had to bounce back and come in again. So initial part of it, I think I missed. But then large part of it I could hear. Thanks for the overall presentation that you have done, and definitely I don't know if I'm not sounding a little wrong here. You do punch a lot of power in what you talk. I mean, it's like a beauty with brain. Definitely, you do come out that you have done your lot of stuff on this, which is good, and we are proud that you are a Telugu Ammai. So it's good. Nice to hear whatever you've spoken. But maybe you would want to cover a few things in terms of the American local domestic politics. For instance, the Joe Biden thing versus Trump that's going to happen now. Some analysts are saying it's probably Joe Biden has a better advantage, or rather it's a vote against Trump rather than pro-Biden. And there are analysts who are saying that probably the Democrats may not put Joe Biden, they might put in Hillary Clinton or somebody else, so that the negativity on Joe Biden is removed. So from an Indian perspective, like what you said, probably it's a country-to-country relationships where, I mean, we had ups and downs. But then Trump specifically was good in some measure for us in trying to, cut down funding to Pakistan or, stuff like that. There are concerns that if Democrats come back, probably they will be more friendly to Pakistan, right? That's a genuine concern. But strangely or oddly enough, 60, 70 or even 80% of Indian Americans tend to vote for Democrats. So there is some kind of mismatch here. So how do you see this in U.S. domestic politics and in the larger Indo-US game plan? How do you look at it?
Yeah, great question. Indian elections and US elections are quite different. Different issues take center stage. For us, it's national security, the counterterrorism, development, and we're such emotional people. We get very caught up in slogans and just we just want to know that we're going to be safe, and that we are going to. I think for us, our identity has become incredibly important. But in the US, they have different issues. I can't believe that healthcare is the number one concern, at least from the Democratic side, which I'm not so sure that healthcare should be the number one concern for any superpower. It should be national security. It should be countering terrorism. After that, it should be economic stuff and definitely immigration issues and all that. And then you have things like healthcare and so on. But I think that also shows what um, I don't want to be rude, but it's like a sick, fat society. And the US is in many ways, figuratively as well as just actually as well. So it's, healthcare is incredibly important. So this whole thing about free healthcare for all, which Bernie Sanders was advocating, which the progressives of the Democratic Party like, but the vast majority of Americans want the choice of private health insurance if they are happy to pay for it. And what I see with the DNC, with the Democrats, with the left is there is no middle ground. It's very extreme. They want all or nothing. They want free healthcare for everybody. I just don't think that makes sense. When you look at the numbers, they don't add up. Now, I wrote an extensive piece based on data and momentum, and just even if you had different figures for different nominees for these two parties, if you just look at the global trends that are happening, I looked at
Preeti,
five.
can you come a little closer to the mic? I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
Yeah. This is better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when you look at the two parties, even if you had different nominees for each, just looking at the global momentum, the trends, the issues that are important, out there to nations at this particular point in time, I looked at 5 main ones, and they all point towards it's not globalization, it's not this free healthcare for all, it's not the welfare state, it's not the free for all. National security is important. Identity politics is out. Globalization is out. Nationalism is in. You look at crumbling. I think a weak opposition. I don't think that the Democrats are a strong opposition right now. And usually when the economy is good, the incumbent usually gets reelected. Now with this corona thing, we have to see. Yes, the economy will be affected, but I think it could also work in the favor of the incumbent I think that their rhetoric should be, well, at least you know what you're going to get with me. With these guys, they can't get anything up and running. You'd be even more damaged if one of them was running the show, right? And he could even, talk about Biden, because I must say with Biden, the way that he is behaving, people are thinking that he's got dementia or he's senile or something like that. He's just not all there. He's having aging problems. He actually would be not necessarily adversarial to India, I must say. But the problem is, I just don't think that he's all there. Even if he stood and if they won, I'm not so sure that he would be hanging around much longer. So then the danger is who comes after. So you're right. I have a nuanced approach to this, which party, left or right, for India. Yes, 70% or so traditionally they vote Democrat. However, if you break it down, the hard left is smaller. And I think there's more people in the middle. There are more people who could have been swayed either way. It's actually a big chunk. So that's when those people can be activated now, I think. But they need to be brought up to speed with what's going on politically. Because I speak to a lot of Desis, younger people especially, and they're clueless about the geopolitics. They don't realize that the DNC has become very anti-India, and there's been a lot of anti-Hindu rhetoric, I would say bigotry even, coming from the DNC, which has not come from the right. They don't see that, they don't get it. They need to be informed, I think. Yes, and sadly, the Indian representatives in Congress are, they're not on India's side, even though they are Desi and even Hindu, some of them. So we have a problem. The more the left will over coddle a certain religious minority, this is why I hate identity politics and intersectionality, because they divide everything into victimized groups, and then they pit the groups against each other, and they have winners and they have losers, and unfortunately for us, we are the losers here. So that's just the way it goes. You just have to be aware and kind of be smart and be aware of that and move on. On the right, I would be nuanced. I see a lot of people, uh, you know, uh, who are very anti-left, I would say, in America, who think that they're all gung-ho for the right. I'd be very careful, because whether it's the H-1B thing or other, or the even you have the Christian right as well. We have You need to be, I think, careful. There's bigotry everywhere. It could come from the left, right. It has come from the right before. So thinking that suddenly you're just going to be welcome with open arms, and you're going to be put up on the pedestal as this token minority group that was so rah-rah, be very careful. You don't want to be used as a tool, just as a vote bank. That's not who we are as a group, and I don't want to see us kind of push and make this happen, and we end up getting screwed at the end, which has happened many times. So that's my answer. I think be nuanced, be pragmatic. um, I would say yes, the left would be much more antagonistic to India with foreign policy, and that's a big problem,
Okay. And maybe I would ask one more question before I throw it open.
Yeah.
What about how do you look at US-China relationship? So the point is, the popular belief in at least the intelligentsia, the think tank in India, is Xi Jinping is going to open his checkbook, and Trump is going to go kiss him, hug him, and it's all going to be normal. All his rhetoric today that China made a mistake, we're going to penalize them, we're going to prosecute them, blah blah, whatever. All that will go, and Mike Pompeo will be asked to shut up the moment Xi Jinping opens his checkbook, because there were indications. Trump kind of said, when they were questioned, he was questioned on China. He kind of said, China is going to buy $300 billion worth of our farm, products, and our farmers are going to be very well off, and they're going to be doing great, and blah blah, whatever. His tone. So that has kind of given an indication to the think tank in India that the so-called China-America-US war is something which is just peripheral, and they're going to kind of between the two of them, they're going to patch it up once Xi Jinping opens his checkbook. So that is a cause of worry for India, right? India would then become not so significant, because China is still going to be friendly with on the economic terms with US.
Yes.
How do you see that?
Very interesting point. This is where it's, I think we're learning that this globalization might not have been such a great idea, because now we find ourselves in a situation where I think the whole world is dependent on China, and also some other powers as well. In some ways, maybe a lot of countries are even dependent on the US, you would say. It's problematic. I think what has been the most disheartening thing for me around all of this pandemic has been, even though it's been so sinister what happened, whether they actually, was this a bioweapon that was let out, or was it an honest mistake that got out of hand? They knew about it. They were very reckless, and they should have informed the US and the WHO weeks before they actually did, and they only did it out of necessity. So it's been disheartening that now we know, that they were not entirely responsible. And the WHO was totally kind of in on this. They also were not, they've said a few statements that were completely false. They both, between them, have risked, I think, so much of, the world at stake. I mean, the whole world is shut down. The entire global economy is kind of being screwed right now, both ways, and nobody has anything to say. I mean, what happened to this great Western civilization that we talk about? They are nothing. They have bowed down to China. I actually give China kudos for for this Eastern kind of power to kind of step up and think that we're gonna be the king of the world, and however sinister way that they've done it in some way, it won't last, but I mean, the audacity that they had to sort of get a country like America to not sort of do anything it's horrifying, to be honest. And I think the US needs to do some self-reflection on are they really such a great power? They don't have the power to stop anything. They have lost the Afghan war. They have lost the war against terrorism. They have not won anything. What's going on? It's scary. I think, yes, this lockdown will be lifted eventually. Business as usual. People will forget about it. I actually think that there will be another I think it'll come back. I think there might be another mini lockdown. We'll deal with it. We'll get out of it. We'll move on. But there will be no serious repercussions from the US. I don't know if other countries will come together and someone's going to do something, but it won't be the US, I think. They say, we're hearing some tough statements, but the action says something completely different. So, I don't know. I don't know what India is going to end up doing, but like I said before, unfortunately, our success in some way also depends on China and also depends on our relationship with them. So we can't shut shop and move on either. We have to work with them. So the only thing I would say is that let's see. Hey, we invented karma, right? So let's hope that karma eventually comes and serves justice.
Yeah, that's right. What you said is right. US is not going to be the one who's going to do anything to China. Neither is India. In fact, in the initial stages, their foreign minister called up Indian foreign minister and requested them, I think let's use the term, what they use, requested India not to use the terms like Chinese virus or Wuhan virus. And you see, India never ever used that word. They always used COVID-19. So, right. Even on the face of all this thing that is happening against China, India has just kept quiet. It never indulged in any of that. So I'm not expecting India to take any tough stand against China anywhere, even in the other forums as well. But Indian public have not taken it easily. And unfortunately, the more platform on which we are doing Zoom was considered to be a Chinese product, and then there are a lot of rhetoric against Zoom. Though Zoom is an American product, and whatever. Today we're not talking about it, but then there's a lot of anger against China and Chinese products. Yes. But I think you've been very pragmatic. India cannot live without Chinese products to some extent. Yes. And I think we need to look at it in a very balanced way. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah?
True. And I think the public sentiment, not just in India, but around the world, is different from the leadership. I think no government is doing anything, but I think people are outraged. If I'm sure most of them are a little suspect about China anyway. I think now I think some people have had it, and in some small ways, people will try to wean off the dependency. I think Vietnam, India. If India was kind of bullish, they could pick up. They could really pick up, but I don't know how bullish they are. I don't think they are, but they could actually really get some of this kind of residue. But I think countries like Vietnam, Taiwan will end up picking up what India could. So let's hope that we get something out of it, because there is some sort of backlash.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think we'll start the Q&A. Dheeraj, you can switch on the chat, please. And we'll go with Kirit Sinha ji. Kirit
Yes,
Sinha,
yes.
please go ahead.
Yes. My question is very to and very in-depth lecture been given. My simple question to you: there's a report from United States Commissions on International Religious Freedom, where the that report had criticized Indian secular concept on the ground of CAA and other decisions. So, how do you think like that would be the hurdle of creating relation between the US and India?
It's a good question. So the hurdle is they have created the hurdle. I mean, it's ironic that India doesn't need a lecture on secularism from America, from a Christian nation like America. Honestly, where there's been enough religious bigotry in this country. I'm talking about America here. India is probably the most open, tolerant, pluralistic, secular country in the world. Is maybe the only country in the world where 85% is a specific religion and still is not technically of that religion, right? So nobody needs to give us sermons. It's shameful because they put us in a group with the worst perpetrators of religious, lack of religious freedom in the world, and we do not belong there. But then you look at I don't know who funds that group. I don't think it's a government organization. It might be independent, but just like so many other, universities and so on, you have to look at funding. You have to look at who's on the board. You have to look at who are these reviewers. It's always the nexuses of hate, as I like to say it. Look, these reports come out periodically. It doesn't mean you're going to be on it forever. I don't know what room there is for protests from the Indian government or Indian lobbies or whatever. I'm not so sure if uh, they can do something about it. They should. I really think they should fight it in some way. I think the CAA thing is they have completely misunderstood that. The other issue is also, I think, the Christian missionaries are upset that uh, they're not fully allowed to come and proselytize, right? Uh, that shouldn't be a. I mean, that's not grounds for a religious. The freedom to practice your religion is there in India. We just don't want forced conversions and imposition and so on, and we are perfectly in our right to push for that. Um, so I would say that the worst case is, even if we don't do anything, the next time this report comes out, I'm sure it'll be, I don't think we'll be in that, in those groups, hopefully. Uh, but, I'd like to see some kind of resistance or some kind of defense, uh, kind of proving the opposite, proving the facts, which would be the opposite narrative of all of this. I'm not so sure the government has, as usual, they haven't done very good messaging, right? They never, sometimes the actions are very good, but their PR is very horrible. So, let's see what transpires.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the messaging has been bad. There was a cryptic reply from the Ministry of External Affairs spokesman. They said, we don't accept this, blah, blah, whatever. But then, like what you said, there has to be a counter narrative, expose them for the funding, their
Yeah.
orientation, the forces behind. That has somehow not happened. That is where I think China is far ahead of anybody else in the world. And sadly for us, unfortunately, Pakistan punches
Yeah.
much, much harder than its weight.
Above its weight. I mean,
Above its weight. We
have
punch much lower.
we could actually learn a lot. We always think that, oh, we are so great and these people are such a basket case, failed state, which they are. But there are a few things that honestly they outperform us. And for this, it's stunning actually, for such a small, kind of poor, failed state with a horrible infrastructure, uh, and kind of zero economic prospects. They have survived, they have thrived. Their brand in some way is higher than ours in the weirdest ways. and their lobbies are very strong. And on the foreign policy, geopolitical scene, I think they've done incredible. Um, we could learn a lot, I think, or just take a cue from them, and we need to step up our PR game, let's say, because it ain't working right now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Let's ask Indira ji, Indira Garimella ji. Please go ahead.
Preeti, hello,
Yeah.
can you see?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Hi.
Yeah, your speech is excellent.
Oh,
Couldn't have agreed more. And then I have couple of points. I think not couple, more than that. And you said about non-alignment, India from the beginning. I think India, though it said explicitly that is non-aligned, but it associated with Russia, and
Yes.
it had a tilt, if not association, it had a tilt with Russia. And Russia actually always helped us,
Yes.
because it has got veto power. And it is pro-India, socialist,
Yes.
some way. So that we have to continue, as you said.
Yeah.
Yes, 400s we are buying. I don't have anything. Then you posed a dilemma that though ahimsa is there, we are spending so much amount on armaments. Okay, we are buying. And what I think is, you know about medieval history, medieval ages, how the kings fought in all the places. But later on, we came to liberal democracy, but the only thing we carried out was the military thing. What the kings followed, that type of military, we are also following to protect our boundaries.
Yeah.
And these Western countries always keep saying that, disarmament should be there, nobody should pile up arms or something. And they are the ones who produce.
Yes.
The very visit of the Trump is to please the lobbies there.
It's true. Yeah.
The produce arms, is it not? They encourage us. They want us to buy. So what Modi ji is doing is, let us transfer the technology, make in India, so that one day we ourselves make in India. That is one good thing. Instead of spending so much of money on them. I think you agree with me. And then the other thing is, these Abrahamic religions, they have an understanding. Otherwise, US Religious Council wouldn't be supporting so much all these atrocity, all these some small skirmishes that are happening in India and posing it as a big ones, is it not? And then they don't know about Hindu religion, and we don't have PR. I think we need people like you who convey the message, and not only you, some other youngsters also potentially should convey what is what in Hindu Dharma, which is there, that is tolerant. Okay, thank you. I agree with you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, she is a Hindu, Dharma ambassador in that sense. You should, madam, you should, Indiraji, you should go onto YouTube and watch some of her videos. She defends the Indian action and, the Hindu Dharma in terms of its, ideology, and in terms of the wrong narrative that the church and the local lobbies throw at her. And, some of the talks go on more than 1 hour. She's vociferously defended it. And so she's done a pretty good job at that.
Thank you.
But I think, like what you said, we'll probably need more Preetis around in US. Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then DSR Murthy ji, please go ahead, sir.
Namaste.
Namaste.
My party is a large segment of the Democratic Party is moving increasingly to the left. And Donald Trump seems to be excessively transactional. Given these two trends, what constituencies in the US are willing to work with for long-term gains for both countries?
That's a good point. This current leadership is transactional, but whether or not that's the case, I still think that the left, not just in America, but around the world, in the UK and even in India, right? It is moving in a different way, whether it's this, kind of almost communist kind of policies and a kind of over coddling of specific certain minority religions, let's say, and we get kind of screwed in that deal there. So I think just when you look at left and right, yes, the right it's more transactional in a way, but I just think that when you weigh everything up, you have to ask yourself who is going to be less damaging to India, and it would be the right. Currently, it wasn't always the case, um, but it is today. I think one thing that we need to do, our community here in America, is we need to understand the power that we have with our vote, because there are only 4 or 5 million Indians in America, but they're the most educated and the wealthiest ethnic group, and they are very generous with supporting candidates, and we do become a good swing vote in certain states. I think we have to pitch or market ourselves to actually both parties, but definitely the right, as that, hey, we could be that swing vote for you. Come woo us, because that's not happening right now. We, out of our own sort of threats with the left, we are running towards this group here, but we need to make sure that it's appreciated, because I always tell people like this, don't, you can be gung-ho, but don't be naive, because tomorrow those same people will start complaining about your faith and this and that, and I don't think you want that. You want people who respect you and respect the weight that you have and respect your contribution. And there are people at the very top that do, but I'm talking about the masses. It's not always the case, because that group is one where they don't travel, they don't read, they know very little about India. And some of their ideas about India are very primitive and not positive. So I think we have to really inform them, and that's on us. Nobody can do that for us. So I think we have I would say that we kind of are stuck between a rock and a hard place, but I think one is a little less damaging than the other, let's say.
Lesser of the evils, that's about it. Yeah. Okay. Vivek ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Preeti ji. Very nice to see you, such a Hindu leader and dynamic and full of passion. Just one or two things. One is a very good question which you only can answer. The other is a small comment. A lot of Indians are confused about China. Yes. It's very simple. The white people, the white men who were greedy to increase their profit, they took all their industries to China in 90s and 2000 and all, just to maximize their profit. And in the bargain, Chinese made dollars, and now they are complaining. So India or any other country thinking that China will be marginalized will never happen. Because everything is made in China. There's no other country which has got weak rules or labor rules like China. The white people know that the Chinese laws are very, ruthless. So they want, they are basically white men. Many Indians don't understand the white man's bottom line is profit. Profit drives white men. Indians think there's some, mother-beti ki relationship. वो हमारा दोस्त है, उसने ये हाथ कर दिया. ये ऐसा नहीं चलता है. The white man is nothing but profit. You can tell me more, and then a very important question I want to ask you.
Okay, you're right. I mean, I think we may be dharmic. We like to think we're dharmic, not always, but at least the ethos is there. But the West isn't like that, and you're right. It is, they have exploited it. They have taken advantage of it. Even now there's all the billionaires they're very happy with China. And when all of this is lifted, they're going to go right back in.
Exactly.
So it's naive to think that suddenly there's going to be some moral awakening in the world and we're all going to shun China. And not at all. I think it's going to be business as usual. I think we need to be smart and almost kind of say, are there areas where maybe we can do something that they're doing? Because we also have benefits with, we also have a big labor pool. And again, like I said, the English and the young, and the mobile and all that, because what China has is they have an aging population and they know that their age of humiliation is coming very, very quickly. And they only maybe have a good 10 years left and then it's all downhill from there. And they know that, and we know that, and they know that we know that. But the West doesn't. but we get it. So I think we need to be smart, be strategic, and have a good relationship with them. You know, I think it
Yes.
does not help us to be adversarial, and they are the only people that can pacify and destabilize and stabilize our neighbors. Really,
Yes.
honestly,
Yes.
right? If they say no, it's a no. So you know, I mean, would I like to see us and China getting closer? In some ways, yes. But then you think about their end game, and that is not compatible with our end game. So
Yes.
it won't work out. But at least we can have a nice working relationship and find ways to uh, take advantage of the situation. I think we're not taking advantage of anything right now. There's a
Yes.
lot of room there, I think.
Yes. One more question is more important to all of Indians, and you can
Yes.
really help in this. You know, a lot of Indians think, you know, that lady was asking, you know, that India doesn't have a good PR, yeah, blah, blah, blah. The main thing is Pakistan has been sleeping with our enemy, that's an old enemy, America, since 1952, since the
Yes.
CENTO came. And they have, you know, they have so many lobby groups. Everything is money. So they pay these lobby groups in Washington, and they pay them, you know, all the Washington Post, you know, your magazines, Time,
Yes.
Newsweek, professors of universities, they're all in Pakistani's lobby because their
Yes.
lobby, the Gora lobby are paying them. So what should India do we cannot dismantle it. The relationship is too deep.
No, that's
So how
true.
can we
Yeah.
open a Burger King instead of they have a McDonald's? How do we open a Burger King of this? This is where you will come in. You will have to have a huge team, and you will
Yes.
tell us how to do it because it's a huge. Indians don't understand that. You know, हमारे बारे में उन्होंने कैसे लिख दिया? They don't know. They're all
Yeah, yeah.
paid. They all paid people. They paid reporters. कश्मीर वाले को Pulitzer कैसे मिल गया? They're all lobby groups here.
I also think that you're right, and I also think that we are making these people famous. You know, like honestly, their credibility in the West, in
Zero.
America, in the world is yeah, especially the New York Times. You know, and even the normal American is tired of seeing all this hate stuff there. So these people don't have anything going for them, but we make them famous because we get so excited when we, you know, it's like we're like sadistic, right? We
Yes.
we like pain when we, I would say, stop subscribing. It just because I'm sure a lot of Desis do subscribe to this crap
Yes, they
so
do. They do.
Yeah, they do, and they shouldn't. I think they should wake up. And even in the UK, you know, the BBC, the same, the Guardian, the same thing, right? You need to pull out because money talks. You know,
Yes.
these people they will take money from any place. So what's stopping us from also making ourselves appealing? They're not bound to anyone or anything.
Yes, exactly.
We need to come together. I think we're very disunited, or there isn't harmony, and there's so much infighting. Anytime there's like a Desi group or a dharmic group or anything
Other
like
will
that,
pull him down.
There's so much ego, there's so much BS that goes on that they never get to doing what they were set up to do.
Yes.
It's just who's going to be the president. I said this, you said this, I'm right, you're wrong, and then while they're fighting, the stuff is going on, you know. So
exactly.
Come together and why? I mean, we're brand. Look at Indian soft power. It's maybe the most precious soft power in the world. Like, you know, come on, the whole world knows India, and you know, I've been to 100 countries. Anywhere I go, people are like, I love India. India's great, and it's so genuine. They love Bollywood. They like food. They like cricket. They like everything about India. So, and they always say, are you Hindu? I love Hindus, this, that. They're so nice people, you know, yoga and this and that. So we have enormous goodwill around the world. So we have, it's already there. I think we just need to push that, and proudly, and we need to set up some serious lobbies, I think, in Washington. They're happening. There are many disjointed groups, I think, but we need to have one big one, I think.
Thank you. Ram Kumarji, please go ahead, sir.
No, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Giridharji. Namaskar ji. My question to you is two parts to the same question. One is, recently there is an interesting comment made by the Indian Prime Minister who talks about a non-aligned activity again. India being closer to the non-aligned movement. This was a comment he made just about 4 or 5 days ago. Is it an indication that India should go equidistant from China and America? One. Second, do you think that with or without the present administration in America coming into power again in the not so distant future, that's in November, do you think there could be a shift in stance either way, even if Mr. Donald Trump continues to be the next president? What's your take on that? Thank you.
So the first, when the Prime Minister says the non-aligned activity, I'm not just about China. I think other alliances that we have as well that are adversarial to the US. And I think he was, in one way, we are like the only power that's been so non-aligned, but in some ways that's worked for us. We have been able to have these various independent relationships, and different ones have served us at different times, right? So I wouldn't say it's all such a big failure. In some ways it's been helpful. I think these are chaotic times. I have a feeling, honestly, the whole world is going to start moving towards non-alignment. I think they're all going to start adopting. You just can't have permanent friends and enemies anymore because of this situation, I think. And I think more people are just going to go insular. I think India has also been very insular forever. That's who we are. It's very inward, right? And I feel like after this pandemic, everybody is going to go a little insular and more sort of self, but kind of isolationist in a way. Yeah, so that's for the first question. And the second question, I think if the same administration comes back to power, I'm not so sure how drastic that stance will be. I have a feeling this relationship seems to be one of optics, and you have to look at the actual policy later. I think the optics will never die down. I genuinely feel that there is a genuine chemistry there. I don't think that's going to disappear. And moving forward, I think they may even they have to work together on many issues, whether it's big pharma or oil data, this and that. So, the optics will be good. I think there's genuine sort of kind of bonhomie going on there. We have to see policy. I think if the policies are a little antagonistic to us, I think we need to step up, and say, look, we're for you, but come on, you need to give us some leeway here. So I think we've never flexed that muscle so much before. I think this would be a good time to do that.
Thank you. I think next is P. Venkatramana from Karimnagar. Yeah, Venkatramana.
Namaste ji.
Yeah.
Preity ji, namaste.
Yes, namaste.
Madam, I would like to know from you why America always supports Saudi Arabia, which is exporting Wahhabi extremist Islam, which is not even a democratic country, and opposing Iran, which has a democratically elected government. And we see world over, most of the terrorist organizations are Sunni Islamic organizations.
Okay, interesting question. So yes, the nature of this kind of terrorism is specific. Yes, it's the Salafi, the Sunni Wahhabi, but I would question the source of that funding. That's changed hands too, because I think there are other sources now that are funding it. And then of course you have states that are executing it. So, even India has a fantastic relationship with Saudi right now. And I think more power to them, right? Because like when you look at MBS and Modi, like this current Saudi leadership is the most pro-India, and I would even say pro-Hindu ever. That's a good thing. We need them and the Emirates. We need these people on our corner. We do not want, because they haven't always been friendly, right? We need all the those OIC countries on our side, and I think Modi has done a great job with, kind of wooing all of them, and they genuinely are, they like India and so on. Now with with the US, you have to understand that a lot of their foreign policy is dictated by their relationship with Israel. So Israel is antagonistic to Iran and not Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia and Israel have come to some sort of agreement where, because Israel's problem is not Saudi, you know, they don't have the same jihadi problem that we do. It's a different kind of maybe jihadi problem. But it's very different in nature. The source is different. You know, even the reasoning and all that is different. So Iran is actually adversarial more to Israel than it is to the US. But you know, it's funny that Israel has so much pull over US foreign policy. India doesn't, and I don't think India ever will. I think that's not something, you know, that's not something, that's not a strategy for us to make US foreign policy be dictated according to India's needs. I know it sounds logical and it would be nice, but it ain't gonna happen, because a lot of these people in you know, Israeli government, including their prime minister, I mean, he studied in the US. I mean, you know, the US put them there, right? So it's like it's American Jewish people, you know, or Israeli Americans or so on. So it's I think the relationship between US and Saudi it has many layers to it, but I think India and Saudi have a fantastic relationship now, better than it's ever been. I'm not even sure that this funding that comes from Saudi, does it come specifically from the royal family, or maybe it comes from other places. Then there are other rich nations that also fund it, you know, and then you got all these horrible outlets that are totally state sponsored, and it's all fake news, it's all propaganda, right? That's not Saudi money, right? That's other monies. So yeah, I think we have to manage that relationship and not something we can sort of dismantle.
Yeah, but then this Sunni Shia thing is something which only India has managed it, and
Yes.
I think US needs to really learn from India, and I think that's an area where India, not the European nations, but India should be used by US to deal with Iran. Unfortunately, when Trump came, he went 2 steps back.
Yes.
That's not good for the US as well. I think somewhere we need to really step up, and I mean, US needs to really understand this equation. They, between this Israel and Saudi lobby, people seem to be forgetting that Iran is a civilizational nation. Leadership could be whatever it is, but the people are great, and they have a great pride in their civilization, unlike the Saudis. Saudis, the force of the government and the family is strong, but the people don't have that kind of culture. But Iranian culture is very strong. Somewhere, I think US needs to tone down and then start doing differently there with Iran. And only India can help them. They don't seem to
only
understand
India
that.
can be the interlocutor between the two.
Yeah.
But you would need Israel's cooperation too. They'd have to be open to all of this. I mean, yeah, I don't understand why so adversarial to Iran, when I think this jihadi problem is not, that's not where the jihadi problem is. We know where the jihadi problem is. It's like,
no,
I feel like
the jihadi, the attacks on Israeli interests are coming from Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is Shia.
And totally supported by Iran. I get you there.
Yeah,
but I'm talking about
that is their
the
problem.
globe. Yes, but I'm talking about, that's not our jihadi problem, and that's not the global,
Our jihadi is Sunni jihadi.
That's true. And that's the one that's also perpetrating around the world. And those are the ones that want this big caliphate and stuff like that. So,
let's see. I mean, somewhere I think, at least in Trump too, probably he will make some amends to the mistakes that he has done. Even I think Christine Fair, I think she thrashed Trump in terms of, going back on the nuclear deal, and,
yes.
When Obama could open up doors with Cuba, probably Trump should have opened up doors with Iran.
Yes.
She says that it's a big failure, but let's see what happens going forward. Yeah. Okay. Next is Anil Sadanand ji. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, good evening. And good evening, madam.
Good evening. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my two questions, madam. As far the defense is concerned, see, we know, I don't know, well, the IPKF, whether we should have accepted or not, but in case in India would have not sent our peacekeeping force to Sri Lanka, we would have lost a very strategic place that would have gone to China. That is what the defense analyst says. And the blunder what we did was, we all know about it, like supporting the Sri Lankan government, and going against the ethnics of the Sri Lankan ethnics, I mean the Tamilians, and that is what costed very dearly. Now, why I'm taking this point is why India did not agree with America with the defense giving our people for the peacekeeping force to Afghanistan, because already they have got enough with Pakistan.
Yes.
And in case we give our military to the international peacekeeping force, and we're going to invite problem from the Taliban and whatnot, and just imagine where would have ended today. So that is a very reason I personally feel it, and then you need to answer this. And my second question is about now that after this COVID-19, the China and Pakistan are really going to get closer. Is this the right time for India and America to chalk out something to work better for our economics? So
okay, so, yeah. So the first question, yes, that is a wonderful opportunity that we had that I think was squandered. I mean, we have to extend ourselves, you know. I think with the US, you have to give it something that it wants and something that or something it needs, and something that no one else can give it. And India can give the US a lot of things that no one else can, and it didn't. Right? You need to extend yourself at some point. Now, there are some analysts who say, you know, it's not our war. Well, it will become your war at some point. You know, if we completely stay out of it, it will absolutely become your war. So I think that was a blunder. You know, we have enough resources and people to send a small contingent, right? And we have goodwill there anyway. Was a mistake. Let's see what the pandemic throws up. I think everything is in flux. I mean, these contracts and deals can be torn up at any point. I mean, if there is an attack on an American base or something, you know, all hell is gonna break loose, and you know, you can easily tear up things like that, or people change their minds. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if this government does go back on it. And I mean, I wish we could twist its arms. I mean, we can, but we didn't, and we are not going to. It's not going to happen. So I think the prayer should be they wake up and they go back on it, or something happens and they're forced to go back on it and tear it up, and then look at other options. And I think, you know, there is scope for India it definitely needs to be involved, because that whole situation will be the biggest victims of whatever the outcome of this Afghan deal. India will be the greatest victim, and it wasn't even involved in the peacekeeping. I mean, in the peace deal, which says a lot about what some of these great countries think about us, right? So we can't be naive, and you know, we can't just think, oh, they think we're such a power, or that, or maybe, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of people who don't want to see a rising India either. And there are people who know that this will hurt India, and they're quite happy to go along with it. So that's blunder, but let's see, there's always hope. The second question, yes, I mean, I do think on a number of areas, it's important for these, you know, the US and India to get closer militarily or strategically or so on. I mean, I think the China-Pakistan relationship is also a little bit antagonistic. It never used to be, but it is becoming now, right? Because of this whole Uyghur situation. And I think moving forward, I mean, I don't know how cozy their relationship is either. I think China is just using them at their will. You know, at some point, they may not use them that much. Or they may change their strategy with them, and they will be left not in a great situation. And there's a lot of internal strife going on there too. You know, people always say it might sort of disintegrate by itself in due course, because it's fragile and there's a lot of divisions and there's a lot of sort of secessionist movements. They're all over, right? These different provinces just are not going to stick around. I think for in the next 10 years, I think we'll see a broken up nation for them. So we can only hope that we remain intact and that there is no huge attack in that time.
Okay. Yeah. Next is VSV Subramaniam ji. Please go ahead.
Namaskar and thanks, madam, and also to Mr. Giridhar ji. I have a small submission.
Yes.
In your endeavors and plans, do you foresee a great role with the US PR representing Indian interest as an active professional, madam?
What can you tell me what that acronym stands for?
USTR is United States Trade Representative Organization.
Oh yeah, okay. That's where I got. No, thank you for sharing. Well, like I mentioned, I think that the trade balance, well, the trade between the two countries has quadrupled apparently in the last 7 to 10 years. It's 150 billion now. It sounds like a lot, but you look at US China, it's enormous. So I think there's a lot of room for much more trade to happen. I think we have tariff issues we need to sort out. They have tariff issues they need to sort out as well, right?
I have asked this question basically because of the pharmaceutical industry and the steel industry are suffering a lot.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
In that context, I asked, man.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know much about the steel industry, but with the pharmacy, we produce so much. We export it too. Yeah, we have to make sure that we are getting the most, I guess, for our products. And also, I'm very concerned about this whole Ayurvedic thing, because I think that big pharma has its eye on that. And we need to have some regulations to make sure that nobody's going to be copying all sorts of formulas and stuff and then passing it off as their invention and technology. The yoga went out of our hand in some way, right? And it took off. I think the Ayurvedic thing is even more fragile because you can call it anything. So I think the departments that take care of this with the government in India I think they have to be proactive, because I'm not so sure they know how the US, these trade lobbies and unions actually work. So they have to kind of get up to speed with what's sort of going on and be more wary, I would say.
Thank you.
Faninder ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Good evening, madam.
Oh, good evening. Thank you.
Madam, my small submission. America is having much more investment in Wuhan labs. Much more investment in Wuhan labs by US.
Yes.
But what are the statements coming from government of US? It's like China is betrayed and all those things.
So I'm just kind of guessing what your question is, because I couldn't hear it properly, but you're saying that there was a lot of US investment in the Wuhan labs, and what statements are coming out from the government now after all of this has happened. It's weird because there has been a lot of some government, some private investment in all of these labs in China, which it proves the point that this thing is more sinister than it appears. It's not some innocent mistake. I think they are people who were very intentionally tinkering with this stuff. And now that it's all come out, or whether it was let out on purpose, they're trying to make up whatever story that they want to sell the world. And I think with the lockdown, we are not really in a position to really fight back. We just have to accept what they say, or let them go on saying what they want to say. The government hasn't made any strong statements about it. They'll condemn things. It's all rhetoric. But the funding will continue. I mean, I heard an interview with somebody from one of these think tanks, and somebody was asking him about, what do you have to say? Are you going to hold them accountable? And he was like, no, we've invested millions and billions, and we're going to invest even more. I mean, he had no concern for any of this stuff. He was happy to continue with investing in science and technology in China. And I was just completely baffled when I heard this. And I thought, are you kidding me? Is this the world that we're living in, that despite all of this, you just want to, find other places to invest in, maybe places that don't, create pandemics around the world. You gotta ask yourself, why are they doing what they're doing? It's like, where's the morality in all of this? So, and who knows? These labs will continue, and the testing will continue there, and all kinds of experiments will happen, because that's, that's what labs do, right? So, yeah, sadly, there's going to be no stopping of funds, I think, for any of this stuff.
Yeah. Fine. I think we have hit the barrier. I think we have just crossed 2 hours. I think we need to slowly wind it down, because I think you need to hit bed. I think you have
do I look tired? I'm like very hyper,
I know, but it's not fair for us. It's 6:30 a.m. for you, and
Oh
you
no,
slept all night.
Don't worry about the time, but yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, everybody has asked so much on Indo-US relationships, and that's the topic of the day today, any which way. But then I'm going to ask something else, about the entertainment industry that you're part of.
Yes.
Of course, I'm not getting into the racist part of it, whether, skin-related issues, and I'm not getting into all that. I'm not asking that. What I'm saying is, when it comes to India, again, this is sticking to India-US issues only. Mm-hmm. The Indian movies that get entry into Oscar, or for that matter, which are promoted there, are more about which celebrate or which showcase Indian poverty.
Yeah.
Rather, or the fissures in the Indian society.
Yeah.
Rather than projecting the, the glory of Bharat. Yeah.
All the good stuff. Yeah.
For instance, why doesn't Bahubali get presented?
So,
right? I think, these things, there are so many that are coming out of India which are fabulous, but then those don't get presented. Maybe Thanaji or, something else, which are, showcasing the valor, greatness, the fight of Bharat, or, they are simply ignored. But whereas the Slumdog Millionaire and, the slums and, that gets glorified. How do you look at this?
So I actually have a positive answer for this. It's actually not bigotry and racism as we could easily point at. It's not that. Bollywood still has a very good name in America, and even people who don't watch it, they're like, Bollywood, oh my God, they're really they're in awe of it. Like, everybody loves Indian food here. It's like everybody knows Bollywood, they like it, music, whatever, even if they don't watch it. So it's got a very positive image. The way that award shows work, it's never commercial movies that get nominated. Forget Bollywood, even in Hollywood, it's never the comedies, it's never Home Alone, those kind of movies that get nominated. It's always the deep movies or the art films. There's a lot of independent artsy movies in Hollywood that end up getting nominated and get the big awards, for acting, for script, this and that. So even in Hollywood, it's never Marvel or Spider-Man. So the typical Bollywood movie is too commercial. you know, and even the typical Hollywood movies to commercial for these awards. That's the only reason. I think the art movies are what they're looking for. I mean, we have positive art movies. They don't always have to be gory, but that's on us. We are not making nice art movies, or, you know, if we made more, we could submit them, because what happens is I think they submit several, or, you know, there are always several in running, and from India also, they look at all the ones that they have and they submit the more. So what are we submitting? You know, I think we could submit different kinds of movies as well, instead of submitting the crap that we do. And then they usually like that because it's like so dramatic and stuff. So a little bit is, we need to make better movies, you know, positive, uplifting, real movies that we could submit, you know, and it doesn't have to be about poverty at all. It could be the opposite of that. It could be spiritual or something like that. And they would totally be open to that. It's, you know, I mean, the Bahubali thing, that is a fantasy movie, you know, and fantasy movies, other than Avatar, that's an exception because you had that CGI stuff. But, you know, you have these unreal fantasy kind of movies. They're not award-winning movies. People
Titanic
are looking
was fantasy. Titanic was
Pardon?
fantasy. Titanic was fantasy.
No, but it was a love story. It was a love story. It was a tragic historical event.
Yes, so was Bahubali.
No, but they don't know that, and it doesn't look like it was a historical event. They're like, what is this? This is some kind of mythological story. You know, it can't look like that. It has to be very real. I think it doesn't appear like, whatever the intention might have been. Somebody who doesn't know much about you know, the culture, doesn't watch those movies, they will just look at that and say, yeah, this is not some award movie, you know, it's not like the genre movie, or doesn't have gravitas, you know, that they want gravitas. They want like that, I want to be moved by a movie, you know. So
Anyway,
I think we need to make better movies. We don't make very good movies, you know.
Oh, well, we do, but the point is, like what you said, they're not presented to Oscar screening committee. That's an issue also. But then I think in the larger frame of things, we tend to get into this issue of wanting a certificate from the white man. You know, why do you need a certification from Oscar?
No,
it doesn't matter.
I would say with film industry, maybe that's one industry where we don't need validation. I'm not a big fan of Bollywood, but it is bigger than Hollywood in many ways. It's also global and stuff. We do not need to be getting certificates from them on this. Maybe there are other things that we should get, you know, we could do better in. I wouldn't say the film industry is one of them. Definitely.
Sure. I think next is Naveen Kumarji. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, Naveen Kumarji. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello, sir. Yeah, it's a nice presentation, madam. Actually, it's my question is a general question. So actually, if you know, and GDP and the standard of living is entirely different.
Yes.
Yeah. So based on the standard of living, India is, you know, that below poverty line. So much of almost 20% of the population is in a below poverty line. So why can't actually, you are a young and dynamic and maybe a well-known famous person, and I think you are also having some foundation, I listened. And so why can't that, we need badly NRI's support. So can't you means need your help to raise the funding, because something awkward to listen, some Melinda foundations, some foreign foundations are doing. So we need badly NRI foundations or support. So I am eager, means need your help as a dynamic person to initiate thing and develop some of the below poverty line people.
I mean, so, you should ask this question. You should ask this question to like Shah Rukh Khan or someone like that. You know, these people are very, very rich, and they could do a whole lot more than what they're doing.
No, madam,
honestly,
only for
I think we have. We have a lot of very famous sports and film people, and maybe even some politicians who could do a lot more. Definitely from the entertainment and sporting world. They have, you know, I don't think you need to look for NRI funding. I think I work with different Indian American companies. They're raising money for research. They're raising money for advocacy and lobbies and all that. I think they are immersed in other kinds of fundraising. I think there are plenty of rich people in India that could do more. And also the government is not great at managing what it has. I think it's wasting a lot, and it's not, also it needs to promote creation of wealth and prosperity. We can't be living as a welfare state, you know. So that's my answer.
Okay. So I think we'll take a last question, and I think we'll wind it down. Yeah. Mr. Pawan Dhake, please go ahead. Pawanji?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, are you getting me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. I just want to know that whether what we are saying a lobby from India, why don't we have a prioritize the main thing? Like we are lagging much behind in the like semiconductor industry. We don't have a good IC's labs and other things are making chips where China is much ahead, and all those technology were given by US only. So if we prioritize our things on the lobby side, then we can fight with the China. Otherwise, it will be very difficult. So what is your view on this?
Well, this is something that the government of India needs to set up. That's not something that companies here can do. That's the issue is that's not a job for some Indian American lobby over here. I think the situation needs to originate from India. You know, I don't know what sort of trade unions you have in India, but they should be having conversations with the American trade unions, and the government to government or business to business agreements need to be made. I think an American Indian lobby is going to be for political or sort of kind of, you know, religious issues and or things of a different nature. So the point you're making is correct, but I think this needs to originate from India rather than from here, because I'm not really sure what power they would have to move anything from here.
Okay, I think we'll close it at that. I'll just ask one question, final question, and then we close it. మీకు తెలుగు వంటకాలు ఏది ఇష్టం? ఏమైనా మీకు చేయడం వస్తుందా?
You're asking me what's my favorite food?
No, I said, do you know Telugu food? What's the Telugu food that you relish, and do you know how to cook Telugu food?
Yes, good food. Well, I mean, my favorite dish is biryani.
Okay.
And because I'm from Hyderabad, you know, so
yeah, maybe you could reply in Telugu.
I'm too shy. It won't happen now. But I like this like bagara bengan, and you know, I love eggplant, so I like all those kind of rich gravy and stuff. But I like biryani a lot, and also puri. It's good, and South Indian food, you know, dosa, idli, and all that stuff is good too.
Okay.
But I like sweets, you know.
Okay, cool. So good, nice talking to you, Preity ji. I think we have crossed more than. I think Ravindra Pandita ji has just come in. Maybe he wants to ask a quick one. Quick one, sir. I think we're just winding up. Yeah.
Thank you. Namaskar. I don't have any questions. Absorbing talk, and I think I heard you. You know, but not too much. It's not my subject, but I think you need not forget your Telugu, your mother tongue.
No, I do. I'm just very shy.
You should please do it. Thank you so much. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Preeti ji, for that wonderful talk. And I'm sure, audience also was pretty active, and, we had a lively session. And hopefully, we wish to see the India-US relationship bloom from here on. And hopefully, it works out in our favor. Indian leadership tries and does something which is beneficial to all of us. Thank you all once again. We have in the invitation we had put her credentials, her Twitter handle and her YouTube. You can go subscribe to it, and then you could be in touch with her. And what the kind of work that she's doing, could all look at it. Similarly, we request all of you to like, subscribe, and share Pragya Bharati's social media assets, be it Twitter, be it YouTube, or Facebook. We would request all of you to be part of our story. And I'm sure there'll be a day, maybe sometime in future, when Preeti ji would be back on our platform on some other subjects.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Namaste, everyone.
Namaste. And
have
Bharat
a beautiful evening, I guess. For me, it's morning, but I'm going to go sleep now. So.
Yeah, please. Bharat Mata ki Jai. Namaste.
Jai Hind.